And with that, I'm going to ask Casey to introduce the panel and to take us from there. Casey.
Thank you so much for having us. I'll try and be brief and get to the stars of the show, my friends Lydia, Darth, and Whitney. But first, I'm going to give you a little readout, and starting with another friend and our patron saint, uh, Jason Barnwell. So this is our good friend Jason Barnwell, General Manager of Digital Transformation for Microsoft Legal, and he's speaking at an event we organized in San Francisco. This was the second such event that we organized. We actually had three. So we had events in New York, San Francisco, and London. Darth, Whitney, and Lydia spoke at both New York and London and did a fabulous, fabulous job. And in particular, they did a fabulous job sharing their real world experiences with Gen AI. So these uh, invite only gatherings were under the Chatham House rule because we wanted people to actually share what they were actually doing, because there is an enormous amount of talk on this subject and a fair amount of activity. But the ratio of talk to activity is mind numbing. And frankly, if ignorance is bliss, then knowledge is, I would say, pain. And we do seem stuck in a forever loop, in that AI is coming for lawyers yet again. All of you know that. He responded to the survey saying, "This is what I've worked on the most this year." Um, and there is a understanding that this time really is different, and yet it's not that different. Uh, we still have the same adoption challenges we've always had. We have all those barriers to change. They just keep coming back around. And this is one of the main things that we heard in these closed door sessions where people were giving their real world experiences deploying generative AI. So the criteria for speaking at these sessions was you had to be far enough along in your Gen AI journey to have genuine lessons learned that were useful to the participants in the room, and you had to be able to share in a sufficient detail so that what you said was actually useful to the participants in the room. And the number of organizations, especially in-house counsel, that met that criteria was quite small. And that's because we are still very, very early days. And yet we at Lex Fusion at least have been positing that this is happening. It's going to be done by you or it's going to be done to you. The genie is not going back in the bottle. The era of stability is over. This is no longer a viable strategy. And yet this is a completely reasonable reaction. There is so much noise out there. It's really hard to identify the signal in that noise. Uh, this is a brand new word I just learned, argle bargle, copious but meaningless talk, nonsense. There is so much of it. And I'd like to say that articles like this one that just came out from Stanford are contributing to the noise because they're telling us that uh, LLMs hallucinate, which we all know, and that you shouldn't rely on them for legal advice in their raw form, which we all know. Except apparently, we still don't all know that. I'm not sure how many mediocre New York attorneys are going to go to a large language model to invent cases, but we still don't seem quite done with that cycle. Everyone still wants those easy buttons. You can read 120 articles on 120 mind-blowing AI tools, but very few of them are going to be honest that most of these tools suck. We are in for an absolute avalanche of garbage products that are thin wrappers on this tech that don't do what we need them to do. And what we need from them is the truth, where what they really want to do is give us answers. So what we want to do is just throw a document at GPT-4 or throw GPT-4 at a document and get whatever it is we want from that document. And yet it takes real engineering to get a response that the provided information does not exist in the document. A great example of this, and I thank my friend Haley Altman for sharing this. She's trying to crack that holy grail of deal points extraction. An automated population of a deal points database, very, very valuable as your transactional lawyers are just screaming at each other about what's market. And yet the amount of engineering that goes into getting those seemingly simple answers from these very complex documents is way beyond let's just turn the models loose on our documents. There's an enormous amount of prompt engineering that goes into getting, again, accurate answers, actually getting to the truth at a level of accuracy that meets our thresholds. And that's where we're stuck right now in what a bunch of researchers at Harvard have called the jagged frontier, which is within the frontier, AI can do an enormous amount to help us with our work, increase quality of outputs, speed, etc. And yet, while it does much more for average performers than it does for high performers, there are tasks that are outside of the frontier where it makes us worse. And here's the big problem with the frontier is that it's invisible. It's not just jagged, it's invisible. That is, we don't intuitively know the tasks where it makes us better versus those where it makes us worse. So we actually have to experiment and have experiments that are bold enough that they fail, where we find out where our intuitions were wrong. And I know just how much we hate that. And so we're going to have to figure out what is best left to humans in their modern human form, what they've now labeled centaurs, where there's a clear dividing line between what the machine does and what the human does, and where we're going to become cyborgs, where there's integrations of human and machines in completing certain tasks. And this is really about the automation of tasks, not the automation of jobs. And it's going to be a while. The road to product is long, and the road to implementation is even longer. We're all very, very excited about retrieval augmented generation, as we should be. And yet all those who have tried it have learned that their data hygiene problems are only heightened. They're only more acute than they were before. Garbage in, garbage out still applies. Data is still siloed. And so now we have these big projects to get our data in order, which we already should have had, but there's much more impetus than there ever was. And it's all the same challenges of industrializing knowledge. We are moving more and more towards a project economy, but there is, of course, the very simple problem that we are terrible at projects. And we are terrible at projects because we want those benefits immediately. We hate implementation dips. And so we have a consistent habit of going back to the status quo rather than suffering through the work to get to a new equilibrium. Again, people want to take shortcuts, and we're going to see a lot of people taking some very stupid shortcuts. There might even be some car dealers out there who make less than prudent decisions when deploying this technology. Things are going to get worse before they get better, in part because people are going to rush out products that aren't ready, and in part because to make projects ready, we're going to have to invest resources that are going to we're going to need to pull through from somewhere in a resource-constrained environment. All apologies to Ron. There is no good empirical evidence that the Gartner hype cycle is actually a thing, except it is a thing in our consciousness. And I think we've probably hit peak hype. That said, we're going to see lots of instances, not only of going through the trough of disillusionment, but plenty of things simply going off the rails. But just because we're at peak hype doesn't mean we're not at an actual technological inflection point. Hype always accompanies a technological inflection point. So you can have hype without without an inflection point, but you're never going to get an inflection point without hype. We believe at Lex Fusion that we've entered another technological super cycle. These happen faster, and they're more impactful because they're compounding. That is, each cycle builds upon the last, and we're at the front end of yet another one. And yet this will take time. While there's all kinds of talk, the actual number of deployments thus far are quite limited. Last year, about $16 billion was spent on Gen AI at the enterprise level. It's about the same as the legal tech market, which, as we all know, unfortunately, is a small, sad corner of the universe. But it's over a 70% compound annual growth rate. By 2027, it should be at around 150 billion, which will be about the aggregate revenue of the Am Law 100. It's growing very quickly. A very recent survey of CEOs suggested, one, that 100% of them were planning on making significant investments in generative AI, and 63% of them were planning to do so by tapping other existing budgets. And I do not think the law department will be exempt from that. And that's despite the fact that law departments are already tapped out in so many different ways. They are completely overwhelmed, and demand just keeps going up. And AI is only going to make it go up even further. Law departments are poorly positioned for this. It's like starting a game of Tetris way behind with the blocks falling quickly, and yet it's inevitable. This is coming, and this was one of the main takeaways from all of our closed door sessions. It's really hard. It is going to get worse before it gets better, but it's happening regardless. We are stuck in Jevons paradox, where because we're going to be able to do more, we're going to do more. Lawyers are going to have to embrace this technology, not to get ahead, but just not to fall behind. And this is totally unfair. No one has the time. No one has the budgets. No one has the patience. And yet it's happening nonetheless. We're running faster and faster, only to fall behind more slowly. But again, it's coming. This is from a forthcoming paper, part 2 of Sense and Sensibility, from Jay and Ed Sohn, our great friends, both of whom spoke at our sessions, predicting that AI deployment will impact 80% of the corporate legal spend. That is both internal and external spend on the delivery of legal services. And that's going to happen not within a 5-month period, but within a 5-year period. And so now is very, very much the time, because if you don't start on this road now, you'll be way behind in terms of getting there when we get going. The analogy I use is that we've invented Formula One engines, and we're loading them onto golf carts. That is our existing processes and infrastructure. Yes, we need to build the full Formula One cars. Yes, we need the pit crews. Yes, we need lots of things. But if you're just going to wait till that car is available, you're going to be sitting there reading the manual when the green light goes and everyone else is off to the races. You're going to fall behind very quickly and never catch up if you've had absolutely no time on the track. Article just from this week that I love that articulates this much better is on the weight equation. And in particular, I'm very focused on this idea of a learning trap. That is, we have to learn what this tech can and can't do and how to use it. And if we try and learn on the fly, when everyone else is getting up to full speed, we're going to crash and crash hard. We are subject to this fundamental tension in strategy, which is we want that which is reliable, which we know is going to work, but nothing truly innovative can be, by definition, proven in advance analytically. We do have to place bets. We do have to experiment, and we are bad at those things. And so with that, I want to turn it over to people who are actually quite good at those things. My great friends from Ford and Microsoft, who have been on this particular journey pretty much longer than anyone, and they have been quite generous, both in closed door sessions and out in public, sharing their insights from where they are thus far. And so, with that, Whitney, Lydia, Darth, thank you for being here, and I flip it to you.
Thank you, Casey. All right. We'd like to introduce ourselves. Whitney, if you could start us off.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that great intro, Casey. I don't know that we're going to meet your slide expectation, but I hope to use the word argle bargle at least 10 times in this presentation today. My name is Whitney Stefko. I'm Associate Director and Senior Counsel of the Legal Ops team here at Ford. Previously, I was a litigator, played in entrepreneurship, fintech, and somehow got dragged back into legal ops and technology by my colleague, Darth.
Yeah, I did that. I'm Darth Vaughn. I'm the Managing Director of our Legal Ops Plus team. I'm also litigation counsel, where I manage a few verticals for litigation. Before joining the legal industry, I was actually a technology consultant way back in the day, and I've kind of merged the two disciplines at the right time. Lydia.
Hi, I'm Lydia Petrakis. I'm Senior Corporate Counsel and Digital Strategist at Microsoft in our Corporate External and Legal Affairs. So the acronym for that, CELA, if you hear me say it. Prior to this role, I served as Product Counsel at Microsoft, working with our Office 365 engineering teams, and then I worked in-house elsewhere on product privacy, commercial transactions, and many others. So I get to take my passions of law and technology into a full-time job now.
So I think Casey set this up nicely. What we're running into right now is market forces colliding with an emerging technology to show us what we've known all along, that we have a productivity problem. And it's acute in many ways for the reasons Casey stated. And we just know things are going to start moving faster. An avalanche of things are going to be coming down the pipeline in the next couple of years, because not only are we leveraging this emerging technology, our clients are leveraging it. So the speed at which things are being developed, produced, is exponentially increasing. So we, both our organizations, Microsoft and Ford Motor Company, have been looking into the application of artificial intelligence to the practice of law for a number of years. And we ran into a issue in that, just recently the technology has kind of caught up with the words, but we're finding, I think, through our respective journeys, that some things are staying the same, and we're still experiencing some of the same problems. And Whitney, what is that problem?
Yeah, in addition to productivity, we still as an industry have a significant data problem. We're still data rich, but information poor. Casey talked a lot about data hygiene issues, and by some estimates, only 10% of data that we have available to us in the legal industry is usable. Most of it is unstructured, dirty data. Dirty data in means dirty data out. And it truly is sort of the perfect opportunity for a technology like generative AI to come in and help us solve both this productivity and data problem. It's really the first time that we've been able to kind of look at a technology like this and think, wow, we might actually have an opportunity to kind of solve these quintessential issues for us really being able to accelerate at the pace we need to keep up with this kind of technology.
So Lydia, that means the robots are going to come and fix everything, right?
Yeah, I wish it was magic. That would be nice. We often feel like it is magic, especially as we're sitting and seeing all the marketing demos. We think it's all just magical. We're going to go back to our desks and all of our problems are solved. But generally, that's not the case. It's kind of the head banging on the computer, like the image Casey showed earlier. So it's powerful, but it's not magic. There's a journey. And this is because if we look at our data, as Whitney said, it is unstructured, but it's also siloed. So across a large organization like Microsoft or Ford, our data is often siloed across different teams, practice groups, you name it. And what happens is when we bring in these robots or generative AI to this unstructured and extremely siloed, ungoverned data, well, they come in, they hit the data, and they malfunction. They don't work right. We don't get that expected return, and definitely don't get that feeling of magic yet.
Right, so
but Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, but so you've been in your journey for over a year with generative AI, as have we. What has been kind of your landing place of where you should start?
Yeah, so it's like everything. It's a continuous journey that we're on to figure out the solution and how it's going. But really what we're finding is that if we start building out our strategy and our infrastructure to build a data factory, so really start thinking about a way to unify all of our data, identify it across all the different areas, and really build on those digital transformation efforts, we start getting better data and we start getting data that we actually know where it is. Because I don't know about y'all, a lot of our data is in people's inboxes and mail. So that's been a challenge. So when we actually start doing this, you can see our robots are a lot happier. They can actually start reasoning over data and optimizing for AI experiences. And so whether you're talking about privacy, regulatory contracts, you name it. If we go to our next slide, this really data factory and our digital transformation layer are building the foundation for our strategy. Now, I'm not saying we have it all figured out. We're actually pivoting and figuring out all the best ways to implement this. But what it does is it creates that foundation to bring in generative AI. So for us, we're using a lot of Microsoft technology, Azure OpenAI, Copilot, Bing. We're looking at Fabric, you name it. And then it gives us the ability is to layer with that and augment all of the great out-of-the-box capability on legal workloads, specific uses and needs. So we look at advise, transact, and comply, and bringing in a mixture of first and third party and really building on it. And so that is going to be how we really start thinking about it. So sum it up, what's really like a data factory? It's the way to think about best organizing, managing, and optimizing your data to leverage it for insights and intelligence and really accelerate your AI journey. But we can't forget that all of this has continued to be possible by digital transformation. So it's that recipe of success. So we think of process automation, data, and AI as a continuous circle together.
So, we had a similar experience, and we thought, however, that because of the uniqueness of this technology, that the benefits would be readily apparent. And we were surprised when we onboarded it and began to try to parse it out to our constituents. The reaction was similar to what we've seen with other emerging technologies. No way, not me, because they're unique, right? Just like everyone else. And even though we would show them examples where truly unique people have been displaced by emerging technologies, what kind of was the response we saw, Whitney?
Yeah, the headlines don't do us any favors in a lot of regards. And a lot of what we're seeing in the news these days are bad use of this type of technology. From a change management perspective, this makes it even more challenging for us to really deploy these types of technologies internally and get the necessary traction and evangelism that we really look for when deploying and integrating this type of technology. This poor lawyer in New York sanctioned for using the fake ChatGPT cases. We just saw Casey's article with Mr. Cohen, and I'm sure we'll see many, many more. But the truth is the lack of or the inability for a lot of these lawyers to use technology effectually is not new. We saw the same during COVID with one of my favorite I'm not a cat scenarios. This particular lawyer had logged into his virtual judicial hearing. Unfortunately, he had a cat filter on his Zoom technology, and during the hearing could not figure out how to take that off. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend logging into YouTube and taking a look for a good chuckle. But he attended the entire hearing as a cat. Now, in this instance, interestingly, we didn't blame Zoom for the failures of this particular lawyer and his inability to remove his cat filter. We sort of joked and said, this is just someone who's not using the technology properly. And I think that that's the same scenario that we're in now. We have a change management issue. We have a human issue. We don't have a technology issue. And that's truly, I think, one of the biggest lessons that we've seen over the last 18 months in deploying this type of technology in-house, both with our internal lawyers, as well as collaborating with some of our outside law firms in use cases. And we're starting to see state bar associations, federal courts, the White House, certainly the Supreme Court has come down recently with guidance on how they're interpreting artificial intelligence regulations and standards and how we as lawyers need to engage with this type of technology. But truly it is building a culture of integration and agility and adaptability when it comes to these kinds of technologies that has been, I think, the biggest challenge with us truly being able to integrate into that.
So if it's not a tech problem and it's a skill or people problem, Lydia, how are you focusing on that culture piece?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's a human-centric problem. And this is not new for any technology, but it is highlighted now with our generative AI. So we look at it from a couple of different ways and perspectives to really shift on how we work. So all of it starts with having strong executive buy-in and leadership, as well from top down and bottom up, and ways that we can help with this culture of innovation and that early adopter spirit. Is this with communications, storytelling to highlight the people that are modeling the way, but also really we're learning this continuing storytelling to help people really understand what it takes to get there. Skilling and upskilling our people. It's no longer just keyword searches and Bing or Google or whatever search engine you may use. It is actually interacting with the technology and a natural human interface. So it's helping people understand that we actually do have the tools to do that using language as legal professionals, but we have to interact with the technology more of a conversation like we would with our colleague or a new associate, an intern, et cetera. And incentivize and recognize. If we don't continue to recognize and incentivize that this is part of everyone's responsibilities in the department, it's not just one group or over here in this silo, it's everybody as part of the journey. And lastly is this really thinking about your sponsors and your catalysts. So we've actually renamed our kind of community of individuals to our AI catalysts instead of tech champs, right? So rebranding and really focusing on mission.
And I just want to focus in on something that Lydia hit about having a leadership's buy-in in this. I previously mentioned that we initially thought that if we just made this available to our colleagues, that they would flock to it because of the productivity gains. Where we certainly got traction in our journey was when the top of the organization, our GC, essentially said he wanted to know what each and every single individual was doing in this space for adopting and boosting productivity. That's when we saw engagement skyrocket. So while, yes, you have to work from the ground up, you definitely need a top-down approach, in my opinion, if you want to accelerate the type of gains you have here. Casey talked about the J-curve that we saw before. We made it a point to message to leadership that, in fact, there would be a dip in productivity, that onboarding this was still a change and human beings needed to adapt to that change. And I can tell you, at least from Ford's organization, and Lydia can chime in on Microsoft, that even though we've been in the Gen AI journey for over a year, we still haven't hit ROI. We are literally just getting here right now. Lydia, are you having the same experience over at Microsoft?
Sure are.
Well, I mean, so I guess from that standpoint, setting your expectations and the expectations of leadership that this is in fact an investment. And while the technology is powerful, that your colleagues will have to adapt to it and change the way that they work is critical. In starting out the journey, how did you go, Lydia, about finding the best use cases for the technology?
Yeah, so for us, we started with asking our people across the organization of where would they want to see generative AI help them with their experiences and day jobs. And we were fortunate, like we're talking about as well with leadership buy-in, that our chief legal officer is our executive sponsor of our initiative, as well as our chief data scientist. And so they help sponsor to make the survey to help people respond and understand the importance of this. And we actually got 250 ideas, which is very impressive for a survey. I don't know about y'all, but we're normally tired of surveys and trying to get answers. But we were able to really get a large group. We also talked about it in our large town halls across the entire organization.
We didn't have as many use cases, Whitney, but how did we go about it?
Yeah, we really approached sourcing use cases in two kind of ways. As Darth mentioned earlier, we did not get the excitement and motivation that we thought we would at onset of announcement of this technology and it being introduced into our legal department. And so we really approached sort of acquiring more folks' interest by first sending out a survey internally, really asking people to kind of tell us what the repetitive tasks that they were doing were, having them document the entire process of work streams from end to end so that we could then come in and identify key steps that were ideal for this type of technology. We also are in an interesting position with our collaboration with our outside counsel partners. And so we also had a pretty robust review of some of our billing entries to start to look at where we might be able to use this technology in collaboration with some of our outside counsel partners. We were very fortunate to have a lot of outside counsel partners who were already participating in their own pilots of this type of technology and were eager and interested in learning with us. And so really, sourcing sort of around 50 use cases, and then narrowing down on a few specific use cases to establish our ROI, build our business use cases, and really learn how we could scale was how we approached kind of sourcing and then eventual integration with this type of technology.
So what was interesting was across both of our organizations, we're kind of 3 buckets for key investment areas, right, Lydia?
Yeah. So if you look at all the different ideas and that you've got, you really can start putting them to 3 key areas. So think of one as advise. So think of that knowledge management, chat experience, transact, no surprise, contracting, and comply, with a really strong focus on regulatory. So all of our organizations are really facing the tsunami of regulatory requirements and thinking about how we're going to start monitoring and complying with that landscape at an accelerated pace. So these are 3 key focus areas that also really impact largely across your organization.
Yeah, so similarly across our organizations, we then kind of ranked those use cases. Whitney, if you could speak a little bit about the methodology behind that.
Absolutely. So we mapped all of the use cases that we identified onto this prioritization matrix. What was the potential return on investment of potentially optimizing any of those particular use cases? And what was the implementation complexity of doing so? And where we had low implementation complexity, but high potential ROI, we really focused our efforts on those particular use cases and scaling those particular use cases. Now, I will say that we didn't do this perfectly, and sometimes complexity and ROI can be a bit of moving targets. But again, focusing on the human-centered approach here and really communicating, in most instances, over-communicating with the stakeholders involved in those processes to make sure that they agreed with our assessment and that we were altering that as time went on in our learnings with the implementation of technology into their work streams was sort of imperative for us tracking each of those use cases and making sure we were prioritizing appropriately.
And I can agree more. We did a similar approach with it, and that low-hanging fruit has been really helpful. But one of the things that helped make that implementation complexity is the teams that actually had spent the years prior investing in digital transformation versus the ones that had it. So sometimes that alone helped change the implementation complexity in itself. And then the other 2 ways that we looked at it we're seeing a lot of third-party market capabilities in the transact bucket, and we're experimenting with different areas, but not as much on that advise and comply. So that's another area where we spend a lot of time internally thinking about how do we handle this.
But Lydia, as Jason likes to say, you work at the candy shop, right? You've got access to data scientists. We have access to data scientists, multiple LLMs. Talk about that experience a little bit.
We do have a candy shop, which means we have opportunities and everywhere you look and turn. So early in the journey, even before we as a department had access to Copilot ourselves, and just as everything was starting to light up, we do have the benefit of having access to data scientists like y'all at Ford. And so we actually had a lab set up. We called it our AI for CLO lab with different skills just to get people to start understanding what are the potential, the possibilities, the art of the possible, and having a safe place to actually be able to experiment with their real data. So not out in the public. And we just started learning, especially areas where we could get some more return on investment and really start that skilling and idea and innovation. And then now we've been able to continue to use some of this as playgrounds, experiments, but also we're able to start using even more of the technology that's out there today.
So safe space, time on the field, the ability to get reps in on using the actual tools. What's the curve for adoption at that point then?
Yeah, so it's still a curve. This is nothing new. You've probably seen this graphic before. So again, like Whitney, Darth, Casey have said beforehand, it's a journey and it's a people-centric, and people don't just come to the technology. So where we really have to start focusing is bringing in and helping people understand and having leadership support that we need people to come in early, play, adopt, and try and have that spirit. That it's not going to be magic and perfect. And most importantly is that we need that recipe of success of technical expertise and subject matter expertise together.
So Lydia, with respect to productivity, we've seen increases in two areas. One is the speed at which we're getting things done, and two is the quality. And they're different in those two different buckets. What's been the experience of Microsoft? And we can talk about the experience of Ford.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're already seeing how GenAI can help with knowledge works. And these are exciting numbers that we saw from developers using GitHub. And a lot of this, and Darth and Whitney, we were talking, a lot of this is really in parallel of what we're seeing of potential and capabilities for other knowledge work like legal. But one of the really great areas that we've been talking about is that draft quality. So if we look at the next one, we know that we often start before AI is that average work product, and the likelihood that we're ever going to get past good or great to outstanding is pretty rare because we don't have a lot of time. We're going fast, we're getting more work, and it requires a lot of humans to be like, hey, Whitney, can you take a look at this? Hey, Darth, can you take a look at this? And to refine it. But with AI, we're able to actually start more at the good to get to the outstanding quicker because we have an assistant right there in the tools that we work in to actually help refine, create first drafts or refine what we're doing, changing tone, adding structure. But I would say that I think a column is almost missing in here. In the middle is that just like the J curve you were showing earlier, sometimes it takes extra investment and even longer to get to that outstanding with AI category because we have to learn and practice our prompting. So for me, it took me a while to get there. And then now that I started understanding, I'm getting returns quicker.
At Ford, we had a similar experience, increases in speed, increases in quality, but specifically we found some tasks that had big or better boosts based on the end user. Whitney, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, without a doubt, the task category, so any task that had sort of a summarization component is where we've seen the biggest productivity increase with our users. And as Casey mentioned, there's certainly a difference between what we're calling super users versus a less mature user in the technology. But without a doubt, that is a net win when we start thinking about where we can look to scale some of these use cases and what will be most productive across the organization. One of the ones that we're most excited about and kind of seeing some early wins in is the comparing info against reference materials. I think that there's a really big opportunity here for the technology to advance, but the users are really demanding this. This is a hot topic interest area. This is something we're hearing continuously and not something that we've really seen the tech solve just yet.
So Lydia, summing it up.
Agree with all of them, especially on that compare. We've been getting about 10 requests, I think, the last 2 weeks of how we understand of this new bill regulation and how does it align with what our internal policy is. That's been one of the top questions the last 2 weeks. But summing it up for us, and when we talked about it, we have a lot of similar learnings across our org. So one, if you haven't heard the word enough, say it 3 more times, data. So really thinking about the underlying data for your organization. Prompting is important as being able to understand how to actually get the outcome that you want and knowing you are going to experiment. You are not going to get it right. You are going to refine it and then start thinking about how do we share in those learnings with others internally and externally to help us move forward the needle on prompting. Patterns. So no, not everything is unique as Darth's earlier slide, and not everyone's a special snowflake. There are patterns that we can apply. And then so importantly is the advancements of POCs and digital transformation efforts, but really focusing on ones that have tangible, relatable experiences. So for example, we just released a request for early adopters to test a POC, and it was one of the quickest and highest response rates that we had, including a lot of our senior leaders, because it is focused in our regulatory area. It's a partnership we've been working on with EY, and we were able to actually say, hey, we're going to try to test these very relatable skills based on workflows and things that you do already that they need. Leadership shapes all of our engagement and culture is just so important. We've been talking about it. Whitney's going to talk about it a little bit more. So I would just emphasize that so much.
Yeah, our experience is that we have messaged that this technology is not here to replace anyone. It's here to enhance people. And we're finding that bookending the platforms and the tools with human activity and subject matter expertise is critical. It's not enough just to have it. You have to have people that know how to use it, and they have to be domain experts in whatever they're using it for. Some of the obstacles we've seen, obviously, is reliability and trust. People either don't trust the platforms themselves, the technology themselves, or I think in some instances, you've seen instances where there's over reliability on the output. Again, not using your subject matter expertise to vet the quality of the output. And the integration, because our data is all over the place, it's difficult to be a one-stop shop everywhere. Whitney, the change management component, where does that rank?
Yeah, you know, Darth, if you want to bump to the next slide, we were talking last night about what our sort of key learnings were. If we could do this all over again, start 18 months ago, what would we do? And change management is a slow and gradual process, and it's also human-centered. So while I think we got to the place of really focusing on kind of the human-centric approach with not only our education around this type of technology, but also our deployment, our scaling, and then our feedback loops, I really wish that we had done that right from the jump. The pace at which this technology is evolving is quick, and we really need to make sure that we are incorporating our colleagues and you know, the mindsets that everyone has around that evolution, and creating those skills of adaptability and agility right from the first step.
Lydia, what would you have done different?
Yeah, so I think some of it that I would have probably done differently is looking at it is bringing in actual practicing professionals in our groups with our technical experts in the room much earlier. So similar to what he's talking about, so they really understand what is possible and also what it really takes to get to that rollout. So we've all been trying to move super fast, and I wouldn't change that for the world, because we've been able to experiment, iterate, fail, learn fast. But bringing everyone in together and thinking about how, when we're doing those quick, fast rollout, how can you be more strategic to bring people along and not just focus on the technical?
I think for me, the thing I would have done different, I don't know that we could have done this given the speed at which we were all trying to adapt and adjust to this, but I would have partnered with like-minded organizations so that we could have learned together. I think we could have exponentially accelerated where we are by doing that and sharing our mutual experiences. I don't know that that was possible 18 months ago, but moving forward, that's our intention, because we think that doing it together in a collective way will allow us to scale at a speed that we probably can't do even with a really great legal ops team here.
I couldn't agree more. I'm glad that we're working together even more, and look forward to working with others.
Absolutely. I think we have a minute or so left. Oz, I'm not sure we're on time, but if you want to open it to any questions, we're happy to give a final shot.
Lucy, 1 or 2 questions?
I don't see any in the chat for the minute.
The one question was whether you're going to share your slides.
I don't care. We can put them in PDF format. There's probably some notes that we shouldn't share.
Great.
Yeah, and I'm going to write up my portion of it and post it, and so those will all be online too. Great. Well, sorry for not leaving enough time for Q&A, but glad that we ended on time. And Oz, thank you for having us, and back to you.